right, everybody, welcome back. It is time for another deep dive, and this time...
Yeah, this one is interesting.
It's a fascinating one, to say the least, right? We're diving into the world of Canary CRAI News Talk with Basil and Gons, and...
It's a wild ride.
It's a wild ride, isn't it? So to set the stage, I mean, imagine getting your news from your buddies, right? Your friends who just happen to have this whole other perspective on things. Like,
right.
They're looking at the same world as us.
Yes.
They're seeing something totally different.
Yeah, and they're not afraid to, like, point out those differences either and, you know,
they're not.
connect them to some pretty big ideas.
Absolutely. And that's what I think makes this so interesting, because they're coming at it from this this phrase they use, alternative Christian worldview.
Yeah.
And that in itself I think is fascinating, because it can mean so many things to so many people.
Right, and it's definitely not a monolithic thing, right? You've got all these different interpretations of Christianity, and they're kind of coming at it from what seems to be a more, let's say, fringe perspective.
Okay.
Right. They're not afraid to challenge the mainstream narratives.
Yeah.
You know, they're really big on biblical prophecy and...
Oh, yeah, big time.
The idea that, like, current events are fulfilling these ancient predictions.
Yeah, and you know what I find fascinating, too, is that they don't shy away from things that a lot of other news outlets might just kind of brush under the rug. Like, they talk about spiritual warfare.
Exactly.
They talk about, you know, the kind of stuff that makes you really kind of think, like, wait a minute, is there more going on here than what meets the eye?
And it's interesting because they do it with a sense of humor, too.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they're not just doom and gloom all the time.
Yeah.
They're
having fun with it.
Yeah, they're having fun with it. They're using humor to kind of make these points and deconstruct those mainstream narratives. And I think that's what makes them so engaging.
Well, and I think it makes it more digestible, too, because, you know, you can get bogged down by the weight of everything that's going on in the world.
Oh, absolutely.
And to have that little bit of levity, I think, helps to kind of process it a little bit.
Yeah, it's like a spoonful of sugar. Helps the medicine go down kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah, so you're not you don't feel as, you know, weighed down by it all the time.
Yeah.
So, I guess to give our listeners a little bit of a taste of what we're talking about here, can you maybe share an example of something specific that Basil and Gons have covered that really exemplifies this whole alternative worldview?
Yeah, absolutely. So one example that really stuck with me was their coverage of the recent UFO hearings in Congress.
Oh, yeah. Everybody's talking about that.
Right. It was a huge deal, right? You had all these, like, mainstream news outlets focusing on the testimony of the pilots and the, you know, the radar data and all this kind of stuff.
The hard evidence.
Right, exactly. And while Basil and Gons acknowledged that evidence, you know, they didn't really dwell on it. Instead, they went in a totally different direction.
Interesting.
They started talking about the spiritual implications of these events.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right? And they were drawing parallels to biblical accounts of angels and demons. And, you know, suggesting that maybe these sightings are a sign of the end times. You know?
Wow.
Because it's so different from anything else I was hearing about it.
No, that's a really, really good example, because I remember seeing that on their website and thinking, that is a completely different take than what I'm used to.
Right, and that's the thing, right? It's not that they're necessarily saying the other stuff is wrong.
Right.
But they're just offering this completely different lens through which to view it.
Exactly, and I think that's the point of this whole deep dive, right? Is that you're not required to agree with everything you hear or to even believe it necessarily.
Yeah.
But it's about opening yourself up to different perspectives.
Absolutely, and to kind of, like, question everything right. Like, why are we so quick to accept the mainstream narrative? Why aren't we questioning things more? And I think that's something that Basil and Gons do really well, is they encourage that kind of critical thinking.
Right, and they really kind of put it back on the listener to say, hey, don't just take our word for it. Go do your own research. Look at the world around you and see what you see.
Exactly, and that's so important, especially in today's world, where we're just bombarded with information from all sides.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's so easy to just kind of get swept up in whatever the prevailing narrative is.
Absolutely.
But taking a step back and saying, like, okay, wait a minute, let me look at this from a different angle. Yeah. That's where the real learning happens.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to wrap up on, actually, because I think ultimately what we get from Canary CRAI News Talk, whether you agree with them or not, is that it's a good reminder to not just take things at face value.
Right.
To always be questioning, to always be kind of digging deeper, and to be open to the possibility that there might be more to the story than what's being presented.
Absolutely, and that there's value in seeking out those alternative perspectives, even if they seem a little out there sometimes.
Exactly. You might be surprised at what you find.
That's right.
All right, everybody, so that is our deep dive into the world of Canary Cry News Talk with Basil and Gons. Go check them out if you're looking for something a little different, a little outside the box, and be sure to let us know what you think.
Yeah, what resonates with you, what doesn't resonate with you. And until next time, keep those minds open.
And keep asking questions.
Absolutely.